Hello, and thank you all for joining us today for our discussion, What Hiring Managers Look For. I'm Amy Goldstein, Chair of the Training Programs for the Legal Mentor Network and founder of Grayson Allen, a recruiting and career coaching firm for attorneys. For those of you who might not be familiar, the Legal Mentor Network is a nonprofit organization focused on providing free legal mentoring to law students and junior attorneys. You can find out more information about the organization and also about how to sign up as a mentee or a mentor on our website, legalmentornetwork.org. For today, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A as we go along. If it makes sense, we'll answer them at the time, or we are going to time at the end to answer any questions that aren't directly connected to the conversation we're having. I'm also going to put up a poll question, if you could please answer it, just so we know if the audience, what the combination of law students versus practicing attorneys are. And then finally, before I turn it over, we would like to thank Kyle Robish and Latitude Legal for sponsoring today's webinar. And with that, I'm going to turn over to Caroline Menez, our moderator, for introductions. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, Amy and the Legal Mentor Network for inviting me to participate in this terrific panel. I'm Caroline Menez, and I'm the Director of Legal Recruiting based in Los Angeles for Sheppard Mullin, an international full-service law firm with over 1,100 lawyers. In my former life, I was a practicing corporate associate in big law, but then I decided to pivot in my career. I worked at Columbia Law School in its career services office for 3.5 years, counseling law students and helping them to secure employment before I decided to return to the law firm. But this time on the management side, I've worked on women's initiatives, alumni affairs, managed paralegals, the corporate department, but spent the bulk of my time, over 15 years, working in-house, recruiting law students, as well as experienced lawyers or laterals for law firms primarily in New York, but now nationally across the country. I'll turn it over to Jennifer to introduce herself.
Very good. Thank you. I'm Jennifer Miller. I am General Counsel of Grammarly, which is an AI writing assistance tool, which hopefully many of you know and use. I am based in Mountain View, California, and I've been at Grammarly now for just under a year, but this is my third General Counsel role.
Peter?
Hey everyone, my name is Peter Halperin. I'm a partner at Haynes & Boone in New York. I specialize in insurance recovery litigation, so suing insurance companies. I started in medium-sized law. I recently was at a small boutique, and now I've gone to a big firm. So really enjoy the Legal Mentoring Network and looking forward to meeting everyone and answering your questions.
James?
Hello, James Arnold. I'm managing counsel of Gore-Tex Fabrics, which is Gore-Tex is obviously a brand that many have heard of, and W.L. Gore is a material science company which makes fluoropolymers and other materials for a wide range of uses throughout industry and also for medical devices. Prior to this position, I held several in-house positions of increasing responsibility. I started my career as a patent lawyer and did that for about 10 years and transitioned to become more of a generalist. Graduated from Howard. My experience inside a law firm is, I can give you a medium-sized firm perspective. No small or large, but I can do medium, and yep, that's about it.
Thanks, everyone. I'm really looking forward to our conversation about what hiring managers look for. The job search kind of has 4 parts to it. So we'll start with getting ready, right? You need to have a resume. And I don't want to spend too much time on resumes because that's a whole session by itself. But what's important to know is that resumes are used to help screen out unqualified candidates. And you have only about 6 seconds to catch the recruiter's eye. So you want to make sure the resume is well organized, easy to read, and has the information that demonstrates you have the right skills and experience for the job you're seeking. So I just wanted to throw it out to the panelists to see if there's anything specific you look for on resumes, or alternatively, are there any red flags that applicants should avoid? Peter?
I I always talk about the no's, and I think it's just really important to know the firm, know yourself, know your background, and really understand, is this potentially a good fit for me? That requires taking some time. That requires doing some research. I know when you're at the beginning of a job search, that seems hard. I think as you've practiced longer and longer, you can kind of better refine what you're looking for. But the worst thing I see is when, someone comes to me knowing what I do and then asks me, hey, I really want to do this tax corporate transactional thing that you have nothing to do with. Can't wait to work with you, right? And it just shows me that they don't really know what they're talking about. And as an attorney, you want to make sure that you're always prepared. So that's basically like job number one, is to be ready, and that indicates that you may not be. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Jennifer, James, do you have anything that you specifically look for on resumes or don't like to see on resumes?
I do.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I do actually. It's really, really interesting. So since I've been at Grammarly, we have hired, let's see, 6 people for my team. And so we've been looking through quite a large number of resumes. And I would say the thing that surprises me the most is how often people don't tailor their resume for the company that they're applying for. And even the most basic things, so for instance, we've hired a couple of commercial attorneys to do tech transactions and to help us negotiate our customer agreements. And oftentimes we would get resumes which show no commercial experience whatsoever, and no indication, no cover letter to explain why maybe they have some transferable skills. So I would say it's really important to make sure that you don't send the same resume to every single role that you're applying to. You really do have to tailor it. And then I would say the other thing is typos. It is the thing that irks me the most, both at Grammarly, where we care a lot about grammar, but also anywhere else. I've had people misspell my company name. I've had them misspell my name. And then I was looking at a resume yesterday, and someone was not for a legal role, but for a different role at my company. And I'm on the interview panel, so I was looking at the resume, and they said that they were in a role starting in 2028 instead of 2018. And so simple things. So I would recommend that people always get someone else to look at their resume to make sure that those typos are caught.
James, anything to add?
Yeah, so not to be cumulative, but I'll just, as a point of emphasis, the skill set should match the resume. And so not only should you highlight it, but you should make sure that what the most important things are at the top of the resume, because people spend that statistics say people spend about 15 seconds looking at your resume. And so no one's going to dig through your resume to find the specific nugget that's going to be important for the job that they're going to hire. Like, for instance, we hired 3 interns last year and we had like over 250 applicants, I think. And so do you really think we spent 10 minutes looking through 250 applications? No. So the people who had what was most important that jumped out, those are the people who were called back for interviews. So that's what I'd add.
So moving on to cover letters, which would accompany a resume, I think well-written cover letters can be helpful, but I will be honest, I don't really read those very carefully unless the resume itself is something, that makes the person look like a worthwhile candidate. One caveat though is I will give every cover letter a scan to see if they mention someone at my organization. So I would say one pro tip is if you know someone at the organization to which you're applying, make sure that is in the first line of your cover letter. James, I know you have some thoughts on cover letters. Can you share how cover letters are important in an application?
So cover letters can be a controversial topic because different people have different takes on them. So take this is my opinion. And so Jennifer and Peter may have a totally different opinion. So take it for what it's worth. My opinion is that cover letters, for the most part, are not that valuable because speaking from my experience, I don't really look at them. The only time that cover letters really come into play is if you're trying to do something different than what you've done in the past, right? And so let's say, for instance, you're a 5-year attorney, right? And so you spent the first 5 years of your life as a litigator. And so for whatever reason, let's say you're a real estate investor or you've got an interest in real estate. Now you want to be a real estate closing transactional attorney. And so no one's gonna give you a job or an interview for that type of position without a cover letter or some type of somebody introducing you to somebody who does that, because there's no relation. No one can look at your resume and say, okay, there's a natural fit for this. So the cover letter, you can explain what skill set is transferable, how you got interested in this, what CLE, what training you've done to be able to make that transition over. And so in that instance, a cover letter could be very valuable. What I would say as a cautionary measure, if you decide to do a cover letter, it can hurt you. So if you're making typos in the cover letter, if you're presenting information that's not really relevant, that could be a problem, because as you're deciding to hire people, one thing you're looking at is if the judgment of the people that you're hiring, because as an attorney or as a law student, intern, judgment is like really important. And so I'm looking at you trying to figure out what's this person's judgment. How are they able to like decipher what's really important and what's really relevant, because that's what lawyers do. And so if you can't figure that out for a cover letter, or you can't figure it out for a resume, then that's maybe not going to translate to the job very well either.
There's a question in the Q&A. What is a good way to say you know someone at the firm you're applying to? Literally, this person suggested that I apply to this firm, or this person suggested I reach out to you. Very easy. One line. That's it. And then someone wrote, given the emphasis on tailored resumes and limited review time, is it advisable to put the most relevant experience at the top regardless of the chronology? I would answer yes, but you're going to have to make it make sense, because we're going to think you put it in the wrong order. So if you title it relevant experience and put that up top and the rest of your, other experience at the bottom, I think that works. I don't know if anyone disagrees.
So I'd also add, so there's something that you call, I think it's called functional resumes. And so for a lot of people like HR people and also recruiters, that can be a red flag, functional resumes. So I wouldn't necessarily go 100% that way, but then there's like a combination resume where you can have like functional aspects of it. And so with that, you could have a section that talks about your relevant skills and experience, and then you could go into chronology. So for instance, if there was a skill set that was relevant to the job that you wanted, or an industry that was relevant to the job that you wanted, let's say that 10 years ago, you worked in healthcare and you had extensive experience in that. And now you want to be a healthcare GC, but the last 5 years you worked in manufacturing. And so you want to get that to the forefront, that you have all this healthcare experience. Well, maybe in your combination resume, you can have a section that talks about your healthcare experience, and then you can go into chronology. These are the chronologies of my job. So that way it doesn't look like you're hiding something, which is the concern with functional resumes.
I think it goes back to something though that you said, and James, you said similar, but to pull something out of all of it, it's really thinking about your audience, which is us, right? And so how do you make this easy for us? And that question, I think, gets to that in part, but the broader theme is just, given how much time people are spending looking at resumes or looking at cover letters, everything you need to say, you've got to say it. You've got to say it succinctly, clearly. You're not going to make grammatical mistakes applying to Jennifer's company, certainly. You just got to think about your audience and how do you make it easy for them. And if the cover letter, is so convoluted to tell the story of how you might, you did something when you were in high school that might be relevant to this experience. If it takes that much time to get to it, we're just going to miss it. So I think the one theme that I want to reiterate is just think about your audience. Like, why would I want to hire you? Why would James or Jennifer or Caroline, why do they want to hire you? Make it easy for us to make that decision. Take the mistakes out, take these things out where we're like, oh, well, if I shoot some ladders down to this section, then maybe I could see that you also speak Spanish. It's just got to be clear. We just got to know who you are and what you can do and how you can help.
Right. And it has to, I would jump in it. It has to be easy to parse with your hiring manager's eyes, the recruiter's eyes. If I often see resumes that are just a massive narrative with almost no white space, and it makes it so difficult to really find the relevant information that I pass beyond those, because I feel like so much of what we do as lawyers, especially in-house, is give succinct and clear advice. If you can't make your resume succinct and clear, it's a red flag.
So you now are at the stage where your resume is mostly ready. Again, because it has to be tailored to the job you're looking for, you're going to have to tweak it once you locate those jobs. The legal job market is incredibly competitive, and every role that's advertised on LinkedIn or a job board is going to have hundreds of applicants. Jennifer, can you discuss how and why people should use their networks to find roles and how they can gain leverage in today's market doing that?
Of course. To your point, there are lots of roles that are posted online. I would posit, however, that the majority of roles, especially as one becomes more senior in the legal field, they are never posted online. They might come through recruiters. They might be recruiters, both internal and external. Companies will source for candidates. It's really important. That's why I tell people your LinkedIn must be really, really thoughtful and clear about what you bring to the table so that those recruiters from in-house companies can find you. Reflecting on my nearly 20 years here in Silicon Valley in-house, I don't think any role that I have ever gotten, from the more junior role that I had starting out at Cisco all the way up to being general counsel of Grammarly, none of those were posted online. And so you must use your network, and you must let people know in your network before you're looking. And we could spend hours talking about how to network. It's just fundamentally becoming friends with people, staying in touch with people, talking with them, helping them when they have needs, and then they'll do the same for you. And then those networks can come from folks that you've worked with, folks that you've interacted with on the other side of a matter. Perhaps if you're at a company and you interact with the venture capitalists, they have their networks. There's lots of ways to build those connections. But I really feel like using your network just opens up a world of roles you'll never, ever find out about. It will get you introduced to people that you would never have the opportunity to meet otherwise. And it will also prevent, in most instances, it will prevent ghosting. I have been ghosted on a job interview for a general counsel role, where I showed up and the recruiter never came and never responded back. And I was not happy with that experience, to say the least, but I didn't know anybody at that company. And if I had had a relationship with someone there, I do believe the recruiter would have felt a responsibility to that person not to do that to me. So I feel like having those relationships in that network just makes everything a bit easier.
So my opinion is that, so I agree with everything she said, and my opinion is also that you should take a multifaceted approach. So I believe networking is essential because, as she said, a majority of jobs either come from networking or recruiters, and those sorts of things. And that's been my experience as well. And so I've obtained jobs through networking. I've obtained them through recruiters. I've obtained them through applying online. So that I know it seems like that never happens, but it does happen as well. So I was actually offered a job. I applied for a senior patent counsel job at a Fortune 10 company, a Fortune 10 oil and gas company. You can guess what it is, because only like two of them that are that large. And I actually got the job. I didn't take the job. Ended up taking a different job. But it happens. You can weed through that system that weeds people out. So it can happen that way as well. But I'll give you a good networking story, right? So when I live in San Diego currently, I work remotely for a company in Delaware. And so I used to work for this company before. So I worked at Gore before, earlier in my career as a patent lawyer, and I came back a couple of years ago as a generalist. And so when I worked at Gore before as a patent lawyer, I wanted to work there like 4 or 5 years. And I was like, next step in my career, I want to be chief patent counsel somewhere. And so like the year before, I went to its Association of Corporate Counsel event. And so for law students who may not be familiar with that, an Association of Corporate Counsel is an association where a lot of in-house attorneys get a continuing legal education. They go to conferences, networking, that sort of thing. So I went to an event, and you meet people and you don't think anything of it. You take their card, you have conversations. And so I met an attorney at this company. We had like a 10-minute conversation. It was a nice conversation. She seemed like a nice person. I remembered her. She remembered me. A year later, I walk into an interview room and she's sitting right there at this company. And I'm like, I like look at her, I smile, she smiles at me, and I end up getting the job, right? And so I don't know if I would have got the job if I hadn't met her before, but it certainly didn't hurt me. So that's just a story of how networking, you just never know what opportunity and what person that you meet is going to open a door for you. So, and you don't do it because it's going to open a door, but it may. I mean, it's good to know people in your profession and it's good not just to do it for people to help you out. It's good to be able to pour into other people and help them out. I mean, that's why we're on this panel. We believe in pouring in other people and helping them out and giving advice. So.
Yeah, and I'll throw in two things. One is I always like to quote my grandmother. She went to law school in 1937 and she lived to 104. Very wise woman. She called herself Confucius Halpern. Certainly no lack of confidence there. But she used to say it's the world of the owl. Who. And I always like that. So it's good to think about, your network and just echoing what James and Jennifer said. But I also think sometimes information is really valuable, and it's not just a linear, like I need this job or I am concerned. It's learning about companies, learning about industries, learning about opportunities. Just information can be really valuable as you kind of shape and figure out your careers. And the last two positions I've taken were through recruiters, and I wasn't looking, but they brought an opportunity to me. But when I was trying to figure out if I wanted to make those moves, I spoke to people, and there were opportunities that I didn't pursue because I spoke to people and I heard things that I didn't like. So I think it's really valuable because you never know who will be where and what people may know, to just, obviously you always want to be kind anyway, but you always just want to keep your door open to share information and to learn from other people, because it can just benefit everyone.
Thank you. So it sounds like we have a lot of experienced lawyers in the audience. And I think once you've worked in a firm for a few years, you might consider going in-house in addition to consider moving laterally. Working as a lawyer in a law firm is different from working in-house. Jennifer, can you address how a candidate should approach applying for an in-house position as opposed to a job in a law firm?
Yeah, I get asked this question quite a lot. I started my career in big law. I was for 7 years at two law firms in DC, one big law, then one smaller law, and then I made the switch in-house. So I had to go through this journey myself. And so I counsel a variety of folks. I mentor them on how to make this move. And I will say it is a little more difficult than I think if you're at a firm then moving to another firm. The way of thinking as an attorney in-house is different. The way you calibrate risk, the way you think through business and company related problems. My particular experience is that as an attorney at Morgan Lewis, which is where I started my career, we would often parachute in to solve a problem that had already occurred, and then we would be lifted out, and once we were done with that project, we would go on to the next, and we wouldn't see things through at the business. Whereas, of course, when you're in-house, you have to you're trying to avoid the problem in the first place, and then of course you have to implement, and you see the results of your problem solving. And so I would say it's really important to, as Peter was saying before, put yourself in the shoes of the company that you want to be at and think about the business problems, the company's problems that they would need you to solve. And all too often when I look at resumes of folks from firms, they're very, worked on patent prosecution, worked on M&A activities. I need to see that the person understands the difference in the type of work that it is and the type of way you have to show up in-house. So when I look at resumes and I think about this, I really counsel people to think about the transferable skills, think about how to tailor your resume, and then articulate in your resume. And then if you're lucky enough to have the interviews, to talk about how you helped your clients solve their business problems, because that's what we need internally. We look for strategic legal advisors, not reactive legal advisors that are coming in just to solve a problem. And then that's how I think using your network, if you have folks in your network that are in-house, to ask them, how would you look at my resume and what would you suggest and how can I tailor this appropriately? And then do some practice interviewing with folks that are in-house, that are hiring managers, so that you can understand the vernacular is a little bit different. There's a million acronyms, the business operates in a certain way, and every company is different. And so I encourage you to think very differently when you're trying to make that shift. It's certainly not impossible. It may just take a little bit more time, but with a strong network of folks, when I mentor people, I can introduce them across my network to other people in-house and say, oh, I have a fabulous attorney that would be great for this role. And I know many, many attorneys that have made that switch. And there are certain practice groups, of course, that are easier and harder, but I'm happy to talk with anybody about this for longer, because I feel like it's a difficult transition, but it's not impossible.
Peter, anything you want to say about lawyers who are looking to lateral?
The
to
outhouse
law
side of the
firm?
house?
Yeah.
The outhouse lawyers?
Mhm.
You know, I think the one thing that I'd just reinforce there is that networking takes time. And I think one fallacy is that, you know, oh, I met James or I met Jennifer and now I'm gonna go work with them. And I think as in with anything, you have to put in time and you have to put in the work and you have to get to know people. And that takes a lot of time. And I just retired from teaching law school after 8 years, but that was one of the things I always had to talk about with the LLMs is, you know, they were only here for a year. So they had a limited amount of time and then they wanted to, you know, stay and work and all that. And I was saying to them, you really have to get to know people and meet people. And it's not just a one-time thing and you send someone your resume and be like, now that we've met, you know, looking forward to working together. It takes time. I think on the law firm side, actually, it's funny, as I get older in my career, I think a lot of the things are similar to what Jennifer was saying, which is because I'm working with Jennifer's and James and people like that in the world, I have to give really practical advice. And I'm looking for people on my team now who are at the level where it's not just, here's what the case says, here's the holding. I want work product that I can pass along to a court, pass along to our client, pass along to, you know, the board of directors or whoever we happen to be working with. And so a lot of it is seeing that you don't just have, you know, the grades and the ability to do kind of the legal hard skills that we all learn in law school, but that you can translate that into something that is actionable work product that a client can say, thank you, now I can go and, you know, do X or Y. I have your recommendation. So I'm looking for people who are just ready to go. And I think that's an important thing to think about is that, you know, yes, I'm willing to, and I have a team of people who I mentor and who I invest in and who I develop, but I need to know that they're already at a certain level before I'm willing to put that time in off the bat, because I want to know that, like, you know, they're going to invest in me in the same way I'm going to invest in them.
Jennifer, James, there's a question in the Q&A. When applying for an in-house role, does a pending admission to a state bar affect a candidate's eligibility? I don't know the answer to that.
Generally, no, but it all depends on the state. So some states have registered in-house counsel rules. Like, for instance, I live in California, and so California has a very specific rule. So if your company has more than, I think, well, actually, it became more restrictive a couple of years ago, but I think before it was, if your company has more than 50 employees in California, or you have another registered in-house counsel, then you have to register as an in-house counsel. Now it's if you have more than 10 employees in California. And so under those rules, like I have to register, even though I give no California legal advice. My clients are in Germany and Delaware, but I still have to register, right? And so some states don't have this rule. It's just if you're licensed anywhere, you can practice in house, and it's just sort of they sort of look the other way. I don't know if that's the right terminology, look the other way, but essentially they don't care that you practice for one client and that client only, and you don't have to necessarily register with the state bar. For instance, well, the last time I checked, so I grew up in Alabama, right? And Alabama does not have a registered in-house counsel rule at the last time I checked. And so if I was to move back to Alabama, I could just practice for a corporation. As long as that was my only client, I'd be fine. I wouldn't necessarily need to join the Alabama bar. So
I would add that if it does depend, but you have to have at least one bar admission.
exactly.
If I couldn't tell if the question was asking if I've just graduated from law school and I'm waiting to get my first bar admission, we wouldn't be able to hire you as an attorney, say at Grammarly, because we require the bar admission of the state for which you are working. It tends to be very state specific based on where you live and where you're doing your work. And then it of course depends on the company and whether they're remote, they support work in different states or countries, or whether you have to be in person in those jurisdictions.
Yeah. And then I just add that generally speaking, for law students, generally speaking, it's very hard to get an in-house job right out of
Oh,
law
yes.
school in general. There's only a couple of companies that I know of that will actually hire you and train you, like Procter & Gamble, I know, Exxon, I know. That's about it. I'm sure there are other companies, but very few.
Yeah, Hewlett Packard used to do it, but they don't do that any longer.
Right, exactly. So it's few and far between. So you're probably going to have to work for the government or work for a law firm in order to get the experience that you need.
I think the one exception is I've seen people who used to intern or work at a company before able to
Sure.
secure an entry-level position as a new grad. But again, very specific and few and far between.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of questions.
Can I just say, Caroline, just very quickly, I would also suggest, I know law school in some ways feels long when you're in it, but it's very fast, right? Because so many courses are prescribed, and so you don't have a lot of discretion. But I really would encourage the law. I know most people here are practicing attorneys, but for the law students, try different things. And like when I was in law school, I interned at a in-house legal department, and I worked at a summer associate at a firm. I worked in government. I'd say try all of those things and see what feels like a good fit for you. And even if you don't decide to go down one of those paths, you then have that background, which will help you as you continue your journey. So really take advantage of the time that you have where you're not working to try different things.
Thank you. I know there's a lot of questions in the Q&A box, but I want to make sure that we get through some of these big questions first. So we'll save it for the Q&A, which I think we have for the last 15 minutes of the hour. Okay, so now the candidate has applied, received an invitation to interview, and they're preparing for the interview. Beyond the basic qualifications, what specific skills or attributes do you think sets a candidate apart? How can they prepare so that they can, make themselves look like a good candidate? I'll start with Jennifer.
Sure. You don't actually have to do a lot to make a good impression, but you have to do research. You must read up about the company, the firm that you're joining. And what I mean by doing research is not just looking at their homepage, reading their press releases. If you're looking at a company, reading about their product. Perhaps if you were coming to Grammarly, I would say you should be reading the Grammarly blog. You should be looking at our product announcements. You should be reading our press releases. You should take the time to look, if you know the people that you'll be interviewing with, look them all up on LinkedIn, see who you know in common so that you can say, oh, I see you used to work with my so person X or Y, we worked here together, or I know this person. It builds a rapport. And then you really do need to through those inquiries, you do need to really have an answer of why do you want to work at that company? I often rate people on that question, why Grammarly? Not just I want to be at a growing company that might go public. That could fit any number of companies. I want to hear that you use our product. Here's the things you like about our product. Here's why the AI space is interesting to me, and here's the experience I've had that's relevant to that. And I read in your blog that you're thinking about doing X, Y, or Z. And those things give you really good questions to ask, and they really do show your enthusiasm, because I want someone who is running towards Grammarly, not running away from where they are. And that is a real difference that I talk a lot about with my recruiting partners. I want someone who really wants to run towards us, not running away and just get any job.
So do your research.
That's right.
And I
James.
just, yeah, can I, oh, sorry, James. go ahead.
Peter.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead, Peter.
I was just going to throw on Jennifer's list. I mean, when I meet with new clients, we always read their annual reports. We always look at, 10K. I want to know what are the challenges that are facing the company? What are the risks that they're disclosing that they're aware of? And it's not something I would have thought of earlier in life, but I think it's actually a really good, helpful summary to say, this is what their challenges are. These are the market forces they're dealing with, just to really understand the company. Sorry.
James.
So the only thing I would add that hasn't already been said is that, so if you're talking about, depending upon what the industry is of the company, it may not be a company, it may be a law firm that you're talking about, but But let's just say it's an in-house position. So depending upon what the industry is, I would try to tailor my resume to like I would try to tailor it to show that I have some level of competence or some level of knowledge in what the company actually does, and then I would actually do some research to get some chops in that area. So then when it comes time for the interview, I can actually discuss these things intelligently, the business issues that the company's facing. And so that would really impress the interviewer. That even though you may not have worked in this space or may not appear to necessarily have the depth of knowledge, that you've actually taken the time to like really understand what the company does and understand the external business environment.
So are there any specific skills or attributes that you might want to emphasize during your interview that will set you apart from someone else? I'm thinking maybe, people are going to have the legal skills, hopefully, right? They would not have gotten the interview without that. What are some of the soft skills that, don't necessarily show up on a resume that you should be discussing?
Having a growth mindset, I think, is the most critical for us. I've often been at companies that are facing first of their kind issues. So there's not immediate precedent for how to solve X or Y. So I want someone who's there to learn and that can talk about how they learn, how they take feedback, how they want to grow. Someone that's a real team player and is collaborative as well. How they want to work cross-functionally is really important because we don't operate in a silo. And that growth mindset, that resilience, can they take feedback and can they grow from the feedback that they're getting? To me, set candidates apart.
So I will take a different approach. And so I will not address soft skills, I will address technical skills. And I will say that what really sets a candidate apart is AI, privacy, and intellectual property. And so I would say those are three very big areas that there is a huge knowledge demand for in-house attorneys. And so if you can gain a at least a basic understanding of AI issues, privacy issues, and intellectual property, it's going to make you extremely marketable because that's going to touch on a lot of areas, no matter what industry you're in. And essentially, AI is going to, if you're an attorney who runs away from AI and you don't want to understand it, you're not going to be an attorney very long. I'll just say that. So, so you really need to run and embrace it.
Peter, did you want to add anything or?
No, I think those are great points. And I would just say on the law firm side, because we're constantly out there marketing, speaking, writing, what have you, trying to be thought leaders in our space, it's so easy to find our content online to the individual as opposed to the company. And so, similarly to what James was just talking about, I mean, I think the last 3 podcasts I've done have been on AI and insurance, or something that people really want to hear about. And so if you're interviewing with me and you haven't listened to one of those, or you're not aware of that area of interest to me, then you haven't done your homework. And I think it's something, again, that shows that can I know that this person is intellectually curious? Do I know that they want to grow, as Jennifer said? Do I know that they'll be prepared? You need to show that you understand what we're thinking about and working towards, because I do think in law firms we're always trying to be on the cutting edge, and so we're going to expect you to be there too.
Jennifer, you mentioned that you want people who are really excited about working for your company, right? They're running toward it instead of running away from it. James, I think you had some thoughts about how candidates can express their enthusiasm for a company. Aside from research, what else can they do to show that they are genuinely interested in this position?
So I'd say one way to express interest, to show genuine interest, is to understand the company's culture. Like, for instance, like my company has a very unique culture, and so like the guiding principles of what makes our company unique is we have 4 guiding principles: freedom, fairness, commitment, and waterline. And I'll quickly go into what that means. So freedom essentially means you have the freedom to make commitments for yourself, and the freedom to help others grow in those commitments. So help others grow in their skill sets and in their knowledge. Fairness, your fairness to the people that you work with. You're fair, and you're fair to like vendors and fair to people you do business with. So basically, you deal with people, look people in the eye, and what you say is what you mean. Freedom, fairness, commitment. Commitment is that you also do what you say what you're going to do, and that you when you do something, you stick by it. And then waterline is that if you have the humility that if you don't know something or something that's going to be substantial and affect the company, or we like to call it the enterprise, in a substantial way, that you have the humility to go ask somebody, and that you don't just to go make decisions or rash decisions that's going to affect everybody, because we're all stockholders and we all have a stake in the company. And so you have to be able to rely on other people. And so I'm looking for things in your resume and through your interview answers that show that your personality and that your the way that you think about life and the way that you view the world sort of fits in with those 4 principles. And so if you understand the 4 principles and then you're able to articulate that, then it's going to go a long way. That means that you've researched the company, you understand what's important to the company and what's important to me.
Thank you. So there are so many qualified candidates out there, right? They have the right skills, they have the right experience. We know cultural fit and enthusiasm can be important factors in that decision-making process. Peter, what are some other factors that go into hiring decisions?
I think to kind of pull back the curtain, I mean, one of the things that people may not understand on the other side is, we are a business, right? We have a profit and loss sheet. We have a CFO. We sell legal services. That's the business that we happen to be in. And so, the decisions that we're making are based on those profit and loss sheets. What are the strategic areas of growth? What offices are we growing in? What practices are we growing in? Where do we see a lot of things coming in the pipeline where we expect we're going to need, a lot more litigators in Charlotte next year. So there's a lot of things happening in the firm on a strategic level that, from the outside, you might say, oh, AM Law, 100, they're all exactly the same. They're all doing the exact same thing. But the reality is there are 100 different businesses working sometimes at cross purposes, but often, looking at different opportunities based on their market profile or their geographic profile or something. And so I guess it's a long way of saying it's not you, it's me. We're often driven by these things where there might be an amazing candidate in Baltimore who can do X, but we're hiring in, Nova Scotia to do Y. And so it's just not a fit at the time, even if we really, really like you. And I think it's important for people to understand that that's, it's not just you. There's a lot going on with I'm saying all law firms, me. I think the other thing to think about, going back to Jennifer's point, is if you want to be here, if you're running toward us and we just don't happen to have a fit at the time, don't let that deter you. I won't name names, but there, when I moved over to this firm, there were a couple of people who were like, hey, do you need some new associates? Like, I'd love to work with you. And, I didn't have an opportunity at the time. I was just moving, I was figuring stuff out, but we're staying in touch, and I am hopeful. I don't know if they're listening or not, but I am hopeful that when there's an opportunity and the dust settles, we'll be able to bring them on. But I know that they're genuinely interested. I know that they really want to work together. And again, I want to invest in people. I just need to know that they want to invest too. And if they want to be here and they understand this place and our culture, we have a no jerks policy and it's strictly enforced. We'll be a jerk about being a jerk. We will enforce that policy. And if you want to be here, we want to give you everything. We want to invest in you.
So getting toward the end of the interview, most interviews end with an invitation for questions. Jennifer, what do you think are good questions to ask? And are there any questions that people should avoid?
Yes. And maybe this is controversial or provocative. I think that often people will say to me what they really care about is work-life balance. And that's the first question they want to ask. And I always say, that's actually the last question that you want to ask. Especially, I will say, if you're coming from a law firm looking to go in-house and this is your first in-house role, because it sends a message. And a lot of people will say, oh, I think that the work-life balance is so much better at a company. I actually beg to differ. In many, it's different. You work just as hard, you just don't bill your hours. And if that is the crux of your question, what is the work-life balance? That's a question about it's so personal to you, and I don't know I don't want to get into what's in your life. I want to know whether or not you can do the work, whether you can thrive here, whether you are a fit for our culture. So the questions that I always ask if I'm looking for a role, or that I like to hear, is you can ask questions that get to that work-life balance, get to the culture. I ask, who will I be working most closely with in this role? What are some of the key projects that I'll be working on? The question that I really like to get from somebody, it makes them stand out, is, what does success look like in this role after 90 days, after a year? What are the key projects that, if I can be successful, do those rise to the measure of success? Someone yesterday actually asked me a good question, which I actually really like. They said, as a manager, how do you like to receive feedback? If we're going to partner together, how can we work most closely together and most effectively? And then I think as you get to those questions, you can very easily suss out the company's values, their culture. I would ask, how is your culture? How are those values, like James was saying, how are they lived? How are they expressed at this company? And those are the sorts of questions that you'll get a pretty clear picture of the work-life balance. But I think it's really important to ask questions that are uniquely position to that company, so that you can really get good information. If you just ask, what are the hours? Or can I please leave at 4 o'clock to go pick my child up at daycare? You can do those questions, but you got to get the job first. And then you come back to those questions later. You really want to understand if this is the place for you. You are interviewing the company just as much as they are interviewing you. And that's really important to remember.
James, Peter, anything you'd like to add?
I don't have
I
anything
was-
additional.
I was going to say that what I like to hear from candidates is that they've been listening and paying attention during the course of the interview. So, you can prepare a lot of questions in advance, and that's good. You should. But to me, what I really appreciate is when someone is asking questions about what we talked about before, because it shows to me that they're paying attention, and that they're thinking on the fly, right? Like it's very in the moment, and that to me is much more impactful than questions that they prepared in advance.
You know what? Something just popped in my mind. I do have one quick cautionary tale. So, regardless of what question you ask, think about why you're asking the question. And so the reason I say this is because I can remember being in law school. And so I had applied for this summer associate job, right? And so I had said, the guy asked me, he was like, well, why are you interested in this firm? And so I did all my research. And so I was like, I'm interested in this firm because of like your patent litigation. And if I like looked up the case, I can't remember, it was some type of drug case, and it's like, you guys were like impressive that you did X, Y, Z. This is like 20 years ago. I can't remember exactly the details, but essentially they did a really good job in this patent litigation. And I was like, yeah, I want to learn from you guys. You're great, this sort of thing. And so the guy, he was like a senior associate or a junior partner. He didn't even know that they had a patent litigation department. So he's like, so he's like, we don't have patent litigation. So it's like the interview is like about to end here because he thinks I'm an idiot. so basically I had to like walk a fine line to explain what that yes, you guys do have a patent litigation department. It's in a different city than where you work at, and all this sort of thing. So I didn't get the job, but it was just an awkward situation. But become prepared for unexpected things and realize why you're asking the question. That's all I want to say, because you just never know what curveball somebody's going to throw at you.
And definitely don't ask questions that are easily knowable by looking online. Asking whether you have an office somewhere, that is not good.
Yeah, I'm still like amazed how this guy got this far into a law firm without knowing that you had, I don't know, but hey, I guess he impressed somebody somewhere along the way.
I know we're kind of getting close to time. I really want to ask about social media / digital presence, because I think there's been a lot of news in the legal press about kind of looking at people's affiliations, but I'm also interested in kind of people's brand building on LinkedIn. So either one or both. James, do you have any thoughts?
On LinkedIn, I definitely have some thoughts on that. So social media can be really good. LinkedIn is great because like almost everybody has it. You can show a great professional presence. You can really expound on things that you can put on your resume because resumes are like 1 or 2 pages, so you can't really go into detail on everything. So you can like put all your relevant information there. If you have had like great volunteer positions and that sort of thing, you can put all that stuff there. So it can be really good. Cautionary tale is other types of social media like Facebook and Instagram and that sort of thing. And so these are really good. Like I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and I love to have political conversations and religious conversations and all that good stuff and all types of controversial conversations on my Facebook and Instagram, but I keep it private, right? So it's set to friends only. Nobody else. You can go to you if you can even find me because I don't even have my name where you can look it up. If I've known you since high school or college, probably not gonna be able to find me. But even if you did, it's set to private, right? And so no one is gonna know my views on anything. You can't tell anything by looking at anything. And so that's the cautionary tale, is because even though I may be tolerant and I like to debate things with different people, and I can be your best friend and you are totally diametrically opposed to everything I believe, and we can still be the best of buddies. A lot of people aren't like that. And so it comes back to a judgment thing. So if you have public posts where you're talking about controversial things, that shows a lack of judgment. People who don't show good judgment are not going to be great candidates for legal positions. And so I think that's just a fundamental thing. And yeah, that's where I'll leave that at.
Jennifer, Peter, anything to add? You don't have to.
No, the only thing I would add is that it's important. Yes, absolutely. I can't really say a whole lot different than James. Keep it private, especially if you have political opinions. I think that's most important. Speaking for myself, for instance, I don't post anything like that online. I just feel like I represent my company. I want everyone and anyone to feel comfortable working with me. And if I were to look at my social media in some way, if I were to look at it from a objective perspective, and there would be anything on there that would make anybody uncomfortable, I would say then that should be removed. LinkedIn, I think, is very, very important. It's hard for people to find you. It's hard for people to stay in touch. I think it should actually be a robust place where you post your wins and you post the things you're doing. And if you're speaking or if you've written, things like that, all of that should be there. It makes you a more valuable candidate. It's very difficult to find people if to be found if you think you might want another role. But I would just say, yeah, take a really hard look and make sure that what you're posting shows good judgment and wouldn't turn people off, because people they want to work in respectful environments where all opinions and any number of backgrounds, whatever it might be, are respected and permitted to thrive. And if you've got things that are not aligned with that on your social media, I think they should come down.
And I just want to echo, I mean, I think LinkedIn is critically important. And I think LinkedIn really helped me personally in my career to build my brand. And certainly I meet people at conferences who are in my field who are like, oh, I've heard of you, or I know you. And I like to think it's because of my litigation prowess, but I think a lot of it is because of LinkedIn. I also, my PSA is in line with everything you guys said. Keep LinkedIn professional. I think there are a lot of people that I've unfollowed or unfriended. I'm not exactly sure, but we're no longer connections because they were like on some crazy post and somehow it showed up and they were like, storming the cap. I mean, I'm not gonna give away my politics, but it was like, oh, they're storming the Capitol. I was like, oh, well, that's not great. So, I think it's only hurt people in their standing with me. And so I do try to be very, just keep it professional. I also think that LinkedIn is really hard. It's more complicated than people think. Trying to find that right balance between authenticity and being genuine and wanting to kind of speak your mind with the fact that it is a professional setting. In the same way in the office, you don't want to necessarily, show your crazy Instagram side. You don't want to do that. So it's very hard because I think the posts that get, and I'll stop talking about this because I could talk about it for hours, but the posts that tend to get the most engagement are the ones that are the most personal, and sometimes things I'd be like, whoa, I would not, someone's journey with an illness or something else. And so it's like, it's a very fine line, because on the one hand, people are like, oh, it's great that people are talking about that in the context of work. And it's nice to see it and know that, other people are going through the same thing that you're going through. But it's also hard to figure out exactly where that line is. So I probably end up more on the side of boring than I need to be. But like, for my San Francisco trip, I threw in a Waymo picture in there just to spice it up a little bit. But, it's really hard. And I suggest that if you have internal people in marketing or other people that you work with or you talk to, and you're not sure about something, run it by them. I run everything by our marketing people, because I'm just like, is that okay? Is that not okay? So don't be afraid to ask questions on, do I post or not post?
Thank you.
This has been, I'm chiming in. This has been outstanding. There are so many points where I was like, yes, oh, good point. Oh, I'm going to remember that. I loved it all. I cannot thank you guys enough. Caroline, Jennifer, Peter, James, every single one of you just contributed so much to the knowledge base of everybody who was on this call and everyone who's going to be watching this video. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I know we have a bunch of questions that we did not have a chance to get to. Two things. First, I hope what I'm about to offer is okay with everybody on the panel. Absolutely feel free to reach out to us. LinkedIn was brought up more than once, so connect with any and all of us. And if there's somebody specific that you want to ask the question to that didn't get answered, by all means do that. And also, if you didn't have a chance to ask a question and you want to, get it out to one of us, by all means do that as well. This is a topic that potentially could be a separate, just a Q&A session. We've done that before when there's so much where we just get together and you bring your questions. So we will definitely keep that in mind. So thank you all for joining us. Again, Carol, we lost James, but James, Caroline, Jennifer, Peter, I really cannot thank you all enough. For anyone who is in New York, the Legal Mentor Network second annual gala will be on Thursday, November 7th. We would love for you to join us. We do have upcoming webinars as well. It will all be posted on our LinkedIn page, so please do follow us on LinkedIn, Legal Mentor Network. And also, if you become, which we would love even more, a mentor or mentee, emails do go out about everything directly. So you'll have both of those opportunities. Also want to say thank you one more time to Kyle Robish and Latitude Legal for sponsoring today's event. Again, it was really a wonderful conversation. And I can't thank everybody enough. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you next time.